Hey Addie, can you guys hear the insane construction noise happening? Like, what time of day do they think that this is acceptable? They were also making construction noise at 10 p.m. last night. 10 p.m. What is happening? What do they think is going on? They think people can sleep through construction noise? They're wrong. Wild. Wild. Absolute insanity. I think they should be fined. Hey Liz. Liz, I have a fun thing that you will like happening today that I'm going to tell everyone shortly. Something that Liz suggested for us came up on my Libby today, so that's fun. Hey Danny. What am I doing? I'm making coffee. I'm making coffee. That's what we do. We make coffee. That's what we do. We're also hungry. We're hungry. Will give you one guess as to what is stuck in my head and has been stuck in my head for 3 days now. I'll be driving here to pick something up. Smallest changes of 1 decade. Hey, that's pretty exciting, Liz. No worries, you'll be able to hear it regardless. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, I have a song stuck in my head. It's been stuck in my head for 3 days. 3 days. It's a lot of days to have the same song. I'm gonna have one of Shira's coffee cakes because I can. Because, I don't know, I'm hungry and I'm pregnant and she made me sugar-free coffee cake. Why wouldn't I enjoy it? Why not? I'm gonna enjoy it with my coffee. This is Secret Husband's coffee, but that's okay. What's everyone else having for breakfast? Anything out amazing and delicious for breakfast? I hope so. Like if I put these in the fridge, protein coffee. It is pretty good. I'm very lucky to have a baker for a friend. So that I can complain, he said, it's like I never get baked goods, you know, because I can't have sugar. So it's kind of nice to have somebody that makes you like a treat or whatever. You know, a little muffin thing. It's exciting. Where are you stopping, Liz? Any place delicious? I hope it's delicious. Because otherwise, what's the point? What's the point? You know? If your lunch isn't delicious, I don't want it. If it's not delicious, I don't want it. That's what I'm saying. It's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Coffee cake dipped in your coffee. It's good stuff. It's the way it was meant to be, I think. Core Life Eatery. Oh, what do they have? I don't think I've ever heard of it. Is it a local place or like a local chain? Sorry, I know I'm not talking as much because I'm eating, but baby girl was hungry. And she told me, you better eat something right now, Mom. And I said, okay. Morning, Jen. Soup, salads, and bowls. I'm a bowl fan. Big bowl fan. I love those types of places where you can go and make a bowl of, like, you know, whatever you're feeling that day. Varieties. Sorry. I'm a mess. When it's time to read, you can do yes, we can do a recap. Absolutely, Priscilla, yes. I tried to download it. I'm struggling. So it's not like I forgot to download it. I'm just literally struggling to download yesterday's episode. So I'll do a recap. Yeah. Sorry, I'm chewing, but the answer is yes. Hey, Cindy. Made a huge mess. I got coffee and coffee cake everywhere. Like a jerk. It's okay. Hey, Sophie. Hey, Whitney. Okay, morning. Can't stick around, unfortunately, because means I want to pop in for a minute. Well, hello. Are you going to be on for Roll for Slime tonight? I hope so. Recap for the end of yesterday. What in the actual? Wait, no. What? Yeah, that's pretty much correct. Yes, Becca just gave you yesterday's recap. You guys want to see? I still haven't finished this mountain of Beanie Baby stuff. So this is what our counter looks like right now. Insane. It is going pretty fast, Avery. You're right. It's pretty fast. Yeah. Okay. So, a couple of things. I know we're probably going to finish this book today, I think. I have downloaded the next book in this universe or whatever, but that is a Kindle Unlimited book, which means I can have it for as much time as we want. And another book that was suggested to us by Liz, and I haven't told you all about it yet, but this other book came up, hey Anya, on my Libby today or yesterday, but those only last for a short period of time. So I'm going to read you the premise, and I was thinking maybe we do it as like an in-between book just because it's kind of interesting. It sounds interesting to me. If you guys are not interested in it and you'd rather go on, sorry, I have the hiccups, and you'd rather go on to the next book in the series, which is Hex in the City, I understand I'm still going to read this other book because it sounds fascinating to me. Oh, good on you. Sorry, the hiccups are crazy. But I'm going to read it to you and see. We're still going to read the other book. The other book's not going to expire. This one's going to expire, which is why I'm like, oh, do we read this right now? You know? So the name of this book is Disney High, The Untold Stories of the Rise and Fall of Disney Channel's Tween Empire. And I was like, I'm into it. That sounds fascinating. So obviously I got it from the library, and I'm going to read you the little blurb, right? You guys didn't even need to hear the thing and you already want it, right? That's what I was thinking. It sounds great. So I'm going to read you the blurb anyway. I think it's going to be fascinating. Let's see, here's the blurb. It says, the first unauthorized look at the inner workings and ultimately the breakdown of the Disney Channel machine. For many kids growing up in the 2000s, there was no cultural touchstone more powerful than the Disney Channel, the most watched cable channel on prime time at its peak. Today, it might be best known for introducing the world to talents like Hilary Duff, Raven-Symoné, Zac Efron, Miley Cyrus, Selena Gomez, the Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, and Zendaya. It wasn't always destined for greatness, though. When the Disney Channel launched in 1983, it was the forgotten stepchild within the Walt Disney Company, forever in the shadow of Disney's more profitable movies and theme parks. But after letting its stars of the Mickey Mouse Club revival, among them Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera, and Ryan Gosling, slip through their fingers, the Disney Channel reinvented itself as a powerhouse tween network. In the new millennium, it churned out billions of dollars in original content and triple threat stars whose careers were almost entirely controlled by the corporation. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the pie, and there were constant clashes between the studio, networks, labels, and the creatives at Disney. It became a pressure cooker for the perfection of its stars. From private feuds and on-set disasters to fanfare that swept the nation and the realities of child stardom, cultural journalist Ashley Spencer offers the inside story of the heyday of TV's House of Mouse, featuring hundreds of exclusive new interviews with former Disney executives, creatives, and celebrities to explore the highs and lows and everything in between. As soon as Liz told me about this, I was like, oh, I'm reading it. Like, that sounds fantastically interesting to me. Exactly. That's exactly what I said. I was like, immediately yes. But I wanted to pitch it to you all. I never want to push a book on you guys. I always want to get your opinion because this book club is it's a, unified front. I'm not like some overlord who's like forcing you to read what I want to read. I'm going to read it anyway. You know what I mean? Like, sorry, I'm doing it regardless. But I thought, we read it in between because it's on a time. I only have that one until November 6th because it's a library book. So we read it right now, and then we can always read the other ones after. There's no time limit on Kindle Unlimited books, which the other one is. So anyway, I'm glad you all agree. I thought you would, but I wanted to check today since we're probably going to finish Hex Appeal today because we're at 84%. Let's see, hold on. Where's our... Oh, well, there are 2 more chapters. We might finish tomorrow. I mean, like today, maybe we'll finish tomorrow and then start the new book 1 chapter. I don't know. Let's see how long these chapters are. So a recap from yesterday for anyone who missed because the other episode hasn't downloaded yet. The new book it's like a look into the early 2000s Disney Channel life, essentially. Very cool. So yesterday, Josh forgot Essie, or was that the day before? But she and her mother, the time left in the book, it doesn't tell me in the book, it says 30 minutes in this chapter, but I read faster than the estimated. We're 84%. The book club is my mental reset each morning. I really appreciate it. Yeah, me too, Whitney. I'm right on with you. It's mine too. So that's why I always want it to be like a safe space where we all choose together. It's like a majority wins kind of situation with the books. Note to self, never ask permission to talk about what. I saw that, Brian. That was weird. You got doxxed for it? Who? By who? The producers? Don't say the producers because you could SUE those. So
Essie and her mom were trying to figure out why Josh would forget her on the fly and what's going on with the monster, why it awoke when it awoke. And Maud, the one who knits the future, or they're not sure. They actually keep saying they're not sure if she knits the future or if she just predicts the future through her knitting. Either way, she looks like she's going to pass away. She's very ill. Not great. And then through the book that tells the genealogy and stuff, they figure out that Sienna, dun dun dun, named her baby Matthew, which is the name, Matthew Hopkins is the name of that original guy who was the witch hunter. So they think maybe he came back through the door with them and like inhabited the baby or something like that. That's what it sounded like to me. I don't know what's gonna happen. And it ended with them going, oh no, basically, but like we don't know what's gonna happen. So definitely ended on a cliffhanger. And Sienna remembers Essie even though Josh didn't. So there's that, which I'm not really sure like how that works. I agree, Brian, they should be open to criticism. I also, and I don't know a lot about the show because I'm a little bit out of touch with the industry right now, I will admit that, but it seems like an odd choice to close a suffragette movement show right before what might be the inauguration of the first woman president. Did anything come out about the scarf? No, Priscilla, it didn't. They asked Maud what she put in it and she was like, bleh. So nothing concrete yet about the scarf. But anyway, I think Suffs, if they were smart, they would at least push it the next week and a half to get through the inauguration. Like, am I crazy, Brian? Like, why are you gonna have, they were pushed out for a new month and tried to bury the announcement. But aren't they closing on January 5th? So that wouldn't be a new month anyway, unless, oh, and they knew for a month, not a new month. They were pushed out and they knew for a month. Oh, was it a stop clause? Did the theater put the stop clause in effect? What other reason would there be? Like, it just seems silly to me. It seems silly to me to not wait at least until the election. Like, listen, like I said, I'm out of touch with most of the inner workings of Broadway these days because I'm so far away and I don't work in it anymore. But it seems like a waste to me when we're only a few weeks from the election. Why not wait? If Kamala wins, a show about the suffragettes is gonna sell like hotcakes because you tell them this is what these women were fighting for. Like, am I crazy? Their actual job is politics. Well, then they should know what's coming. Right, Brian? I mean, like, am I crazy? Like it seems insane to me that they're not looking at the temperature of what's going on in our country and going, this could be a good thing. They could even move theaters. Go to a smaller theater if you have to. Wouldn't be the first time. I don't know. It's weird to me. It was a weird choice to me to close right before Inauguration Day. Like, what if she wins, which God willing she will, and then the suffragette play closes right before we have a woman president? Insanity. Stop loss was from early in the run because they picked the wrong theater and wrong time of year. It was the wrong time of year when she wins. Exactly, Anya. When she wins. When we have our first woman president, don't you want... I mean, like, imagine the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade 3 weeks after the election of the first woman president, where you have a performance of Suffs. Phenomenal. What a moment. What a cultural touchstone. Well, the producers didn't want to alienate potential audience members by capitalizing on her entering the race. Well, they should have. I disagree with that entirely. If I had been on the production team of Suffs, I would have capitalized the F out of her entering the race. I would have been like, this is what we've been waiting for. This is what the women in these stories have been waiting for. This is what they fought for. This is not a made-up story. This is the suffragette movement. They wanted this. Trust me, they wanted this. Go back in time, get you a ghost whisperer, and let's find out if they think this is good. I did not see new Hunger Games book covers. No. Why do we have new Hunger Games book covers? Is something happening that I don't know about? Big Hunger Games fan here. Didn't know that. 100% the producers effed up and don't want to take responsibility for losing $19 million. You know what the thing is, and I've said this before, and we're going to read in a second. I'm not going to labor on this too long because I know you all have heard my diatribe on this 100 times. Broadway, as an industry, is about 75 years behind the rest of, because of the new Hamish book. I'm excited for that. Yeah. About 65 to 75 years behind the rest of entertainment as an industry. And I can't for the life of me understand it. Like, they're just now on Broadway figuring out things that Lucille Ball figured out when she had I Love Lucy. Like, that's how far behind they are in their, like, get it together. I can't tell you how many times I was working for a producer and I pitched a marketing thing and they were like, that's very risky. I was like, but it's free. Like, we're talking about free social media marketing. You're paying a person to sit here anyway and do your social media. Why not throw everything at the wall and see what sticks? And if someone who's in the demographic of your audience says, let's try this, why not try it? I'm not saying make it your only marketing ploy, but like among many, why not? You know? Like, for example, I worked on a very failed show. Oh my God, I can't even remember the name right now because I was like low level on it, about baseball players. Like, oh God. What was that show that was at Circle in the Square? It was about baseball. It was about the Yankees, but not damn Yankees. I can't even remember what it was called. That's how bad it was. But I was in Bronx Bombers. That's right. I was working on Bronx Bombers. Yes, I worked on Bronx Bombers. I was still an intern in the press office at the time. I hadn't yet been bumped up from... Exactly, Jess. Exactly. You have to just go for it. And you know who's proving my theory about just go for it right now? Kamala HQ's TikTok is proving just go for it. I didn't spend any money and I wanted my money back, Brian. So I was on the team for Bronx Bombers, but as an intern. So I got invited to the meetings, but I didn't get to speak because I was just an intern, right? This is a long time ago. We're talking like 15 years ago at this point, you guys. And after we left the meeting, I was in the elevator with just my boss and the team from our office, not the production team, not any actors, not anyone from the show, just the people whose office I actually worked in. And keep in mind, yes, I'm an intern, but part of being an intern and part of working for free is that you get to learn, right? That's the whole purpose. They're giving you knowledge, you give them hours. That's literally the exchange, right? Because all I got was a subway pass for my time, right? And so in the elevator, I said to them, why don't we, and I can't even remember what I pitched at the time. I pitched like some crazy, like super, I remember what it was. This is what I said, okay? Because the producers in the meeting, and I hope no one ever hears this. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It's been so many years now. No one will ever care. But in the meeting, one of the producers actually said, and this is like literal, I will never forget this. This woman said, I don't care if Broadway people don't like baseball. This story needs to be told. Okay? And so I said to my boss when we got in the elevator, I said, why don't we play on that? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, say out loud, this is not for Broadway people. This is a story being told for the baseball fans, the sports fans, whatever like that. And I wish I would have said it when we were working on Rocky because we really should have used it for that. But I said, like, so what? Like, if she's that confident in her story and she says, I don't care if Broadway people like my story or not, it's not about Broadway fans, it's about baseball. That's a great line from a passionate person who really, yeah, he does, but I've got stories I could tell you about him, Brian. And I was like, she's so passionate about this story, go balls to the wall and say, we don't care what you Broadway jazz hands kids think. This is about baseball. You know what I mean? That sounds like a line from a movie almost. And he was like, no, we can't say that. We'd alienate all the Broadway people. And I was like, bro, the Broadway people aren't coming to your show anyway because they don't care about baseball. You know what I'm saying? I was like, if they're already not coming, who are you alienating? Try to get the attention of the people who would be drawn in by a quote like, I don't care what the Broadway fans think. Oh, I can't believe it's been a year already, Mary. That's amazing. Happy birthday, little Autumn. Producers like that. I can't fault when they try everything to bring. Yes, but they wouldn't try it. That's the thing, Brian. They wouldn't try it. They wouldn't even put that out. I was like, okay, and they laughed at me like I was a dumb intern who couldn't think of. They were like, that's unfathomable. We would alienate all the Broadway fans if we said we didn't care what they think. I was like, they're not coming anyway. Why does it matter? Like and I mean, like I ended up getting hired anyway, and I ended up working on a ton of amazing shows, so it didn't affect my internship in the long run. But yeah, I mean, Ken, I have so many mixed feelings about Ken Bryant, and I can't say a lot of it out loud on a live, but I think some of it might be too far in his, you know, I think the newer generation's more of your perspective. Yeah, I think it is. And I was just too far out for the time. They thought that I was silly and behind, or silly and like too young. You know what I mean? They were like, oh, she doesn't know anything. She's never worked on a show before. Me, you know, whatever like that. And I was like, no, I haven't, but I do have the biggest blog on Broadway. I couldn't tell them that. They didn't know about Broadway Spotted at the time, but I was like, y'all give me free tickets to everything behind the scenes because you don't know I have this blog, so you obviously think I'm doing something right. But anyway, people may have hated Catherine Quinn last year, but she's put the idea to work again. Yeah. No, I know. Anyway, let's read because we've got work ahead and we've got Roll for Slime tonight, which by the way, everyone should sign up for. But I do think that it is it profitable despite everyone thinking it would be? Yeah. I do think that having out of the box marketing in this day and age is the way to go unless you have a show that appeals to boomers. That's it. You know, I mean, Beetlejuice being able to come back after the pandemic, even for a small amount of time, proved that, right? So, anyway, to chapter 19. Here we go. About 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, two witches landed in Josh's backyard. It's regular Roll for Slime here on TikTok, Whitney. There's an event for it here on my page. When this live ends, it'll probably tell you, okay, Anya, see you later. It'll probably tell you can sign up for tonight's live to get an alert or whatever. And some people have found that the alerts work better if they sign up for the event. That's why I made the event. Obviously, it's a free event. I only made it just for the sake of the alerts, nothing else. Anyway, at about 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, two witches landed in Josh's backyard. He'd spent an awful sleepless night trying to figure out why the hell Sienna had thought the intruder in his room was actually his girlfriend, and being tortured by the possibility that maybe she was right and maybe he was going mad. The snow finally stopped falling sometime after dawn, although falling was really the wrong word for the substance that seemed to be hurling itself at his house in an absolute fury. But the storm didn't abate. The snow turned to rain, the thunder and lightning continued to crash, and the memory of the naked stranger in Josh's bed continued to spin around in his fevered nightmares. He was just about dozing off again when Sienna tapped on his door and said, Josh, you should probably come and see this. Do you still put the notifications of book club on Patreon? I do. Every morning, Naisa. I do it at least half an hour before so everyone has a chance to see it. That being said, it's always at 8:30, so as long as you get on at 8:30, you're going to see it regardless. Like, I'm very rarely late. You know, it's pretty much 8:30 on the nose or like 8:25, you know? Anyway. He groaned. He was so tired he felt sick. See what? Did the police finally get here? You just need to come with me right now. He dragged himself out of bed and stumbled after her like a zombie and peered blearily at the bassinet by her bed. The baby appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Is he okay? Matthew? Yes, he's fine. He went right to sleep after you stopped whatever it was you were doing last night. But look, up there. She was pointing out of the tall window at something in the sky, something in the bruised sky. Josh blinked and yawned. What is it, a couple of birds? They did look large. Herons, maybe storks, freaking phoenixes. He didn't care what they were. You did not get me out of bed to see birds, did you? They're not birds. Look properly. Josh yawned again and peered through the glass. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He blinked again. "What the F?" he said, and Sienna calmly said, "It appears to be 2 women on broomsticks." She was right. It really did appear to be 2 women on broomsticks. Actual broomsticks, like the kind that you bought at Halloween, with bundles of twigs tied to one end, and each of them held a woman, one in a long red dress, her hair streaming dramatically behind her, and the other in dungarees and glasses. "They've been circling the house for a couple of minutes now," Sienna said, as if she was indeed reporting on the action of some birds. "Blessing told me to look out for them." "Blessing?" "My midwife. Josh, don't tell me you forgot about Blessing, too." "Why would I know your midwife?" Josh said, but his attention was only half on her and half on the woman in the dungarees. She swooped low over some trees, wheeled around closer to his house, and looked right at him. Against the bruised and stormy sky, her hair flamed red and her glasses flashed lightning at him. He went cold. "Oh my gosh, it's her. That's the woman who was in here last night." Sienna sighed. "Oh God, Josh, please don't start this again." Josh pointed an accusatory finger at the witch, who was even now coming to land in the long meadow behind the house, in the shelter of ruined, fire-blackened walls of the old house. "That's my property. She's trespassing. I'm going to call the police." "And tell them what? That a witch just landed on your lawn? Josh, please, listen to yourself." He hesitated. She did have a very good point. He rubbed his hands over his face. Maybe he was having some sort of breakdown. Maybe everything, Maya, his father, moving from one country to another, Sienna, and the baby had finally just broken his brain. Or maybe he was on drugs. That woman last night could have. He sank down onto Sienna's bed. I think I'm going mad," he told her. Sienna put her head to one side. "Why don't you just come outside and talk to them?" she said. "Blessing said we should talk to them." "Who is this Blessing?" Josh groaned, and he had his head in his hands. "She also said that we should take Essie her phone back because there's something on it she wants to show you." Josh turned his head and glowered at her. "You're still sticking with this whole Essie thing, are you? Sienna, we're in a country called Essex, and you think you just haven't made up the name Essie or something?" Sienna just fixed him with a glare and said, "Get dressed. We're going outside." And Josh did, mostly because he couldn't think of anything better to do. She was right. He couldn't call the police again. They clearly hadn't believed him last night. What was Sienna shouting and the stranger was his girlfriend in the background? They clearly thought it was some kind of joke or a lover's tiff and reluctantly agreed to send someone around later after the rain eased. And now what? The rain was still hammering down, and the girl that he had, according to the evidence in his bathroom trash, been having beep boop with last night had just flown in on a broomstick. He really ought to be calling an ambulance and having himself checked for a brain tumor or psychotropic drugs or something. Instead, he was putting on his raincoat in the vain hope that he wouldn't get drowned from above the moment that he stepped outside, slipping the stranger's phone into his pocket. "You're not bringing the baby with you?" he said, disbelieving, as he found Sienna in the kitchen zipping some kind of kangaroo pouch to the front of the coat where the baby was lolling in a sling. Wait, oh, sorry. He wasn't saying it like that. He was saying it like this. "You're not bringing the baby." Not like, okay, yeah. "Well, I'm not leaving him," she said, fussing with a hood over the baby's head. "Bonding time is very important in the early weeks, Josh." Josh stared in disbelief. Maybe they had both gone mad. "It's biblical outside," he said. "I think if you go down the road, there's a guy with a big boat collecting pairs of animals, Sienna." "You're so funny," said Sienna, slipping her feet into gum boots that had cost more than he had ever thought gum boots could cost. "Did you bring the phone? You need to hand it over." Josh got it out of his pocket and hesitated. "Sienna," he began, and he took the edge of the baby's face, just visible under... he looked at the edge of the baby's face, just visible under all the waterproofing. She wouldn't take him if the women outside were really dangerous, would she? No, she wouldn't do that. He shoved a hand through his hair. His brain felt like fog. When he tried to remember the last week, he could only think of Sienna and the baby, but he couldn't quite remember where the baby had actually been born. He remembered a room that looked like a luxury hotel suite with a roaring fire in a clawfoot bathtub, but that couldn't possibly be right, could it? Sienna's determined expression softened at his obvious confusion. "Josh, whatever is going on here, we will fix it. Even if it's some kind of weird amnesia that you have, I'll get you the best doctors, but come on, you're going to be late." "Late for what?" said Josh, but Sienna was already taking the phone from his unresisting hand and sailing out the door. He didn't feel like he had much choice but to follow her. The rain hit him like a fist the second he stepped out the back door. The hood of his coat did nothing, and Josh turned to lock the door. He wasn't going to let somebody sneak in while those women distracted him, and the wind slammed the door against him. And then suddenly, it gentled. For a second, the rain ceased its pounding, and then, inevitably, it started up again. Well, that was weird. He pocketed the key and went after Sienna, leaning into the wind and swiping the hard rain from his face. She didn't seem to be having any trouble with it, strolling along as if there were no more than a slight drizzle in the air. "This is what going mad feels like," Josh muttered to himself and struggled over the cracked and broken terrace, down the steps to the massively overgrown lawn, and through the knee-high wet grass. Unlike Sienna, he hadn't put on gumboots. His jeans soaked up the water like a sponge. Grumbling, he forged ahead toward the charming architectural feature that he'd been told was a ha-ha. He didn't find it so funny, consisting as it did of concealing a wall abruptly dropping away at the end of the garden and into a ditch below. Apparently, it was to keep grazing wildlife from getting into the garden. In reality, it looked like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Sienna stood at the edge of it, frowning a little, and Josh was about to suggest climbing down and helping her across when a broomstick swished to halt in front of her. A broomstick, in midair, in the pouring rain. Sitting on it was the woman in red, looking like a pre-Raphaelite painting. She held her hand out to Sienna, who took it before Josh could shout a warning and sort of skipped across the ditch. "What the F?" he whimpered as she turned and waved at him. "Come on, Josh." "Yes, do come on, Mr. Henderson, is it?" said the woman on the broom, and she held her hand out to him. There was a glint in her eye, one that he didn't like one bit. "You must be kidding," he said, and made his way over the ditch by a totally masculine and sportsmanlike method of sitting down on one edge and scrambling inelegantly up the other side. "My way was faster," sighed the woman on the broom. She floated along beside him as he trudged after Sienna. "I must say, you are displaying an awful lot of courage here," she added, and Josh's feet were squelching inside his boots, and the rain had soaked through to his underwear. "Yep," he said, "that's me, Captain Courageous. Following your sister like this when you have no idea what's in store for you." Josh watched Sienna reach the low pile of bricks that marked some kind of previous manor house. She waved at the woman in the dungarees and went forward, pulled the baby's hood aside to show him off, and the other woman grinned and waved her hand about, but the smile faded when she glanced over at Josh. He glared at her and then at the woman flying the broomstick beside him. There's a woman on a broomstick 3 feet from me," he thought. I'm not courageous, I'm just insane." "What is in store?" he asked the broomstick woman. "We're going to raise an ancient evil and then destroy it," she replied calmly. "Cool," said Josh. "Does that happen around here a lot?" "Oh, more often than you'd think." "You know what, lady? I don't even know what I think anymore." She shrugged it off as if to concede the point. "Tell me, Mr. Henderson, did you ever find Beldam House?" He stopped dead, wondering for a second if lightning had struck him. "Beldam House?" he said. "Yes. Essie tells me you had trouble finding it to begin with. Don't feel bad. Most people do." She prattled on, still hovering a couple feet above the air, and as Josh stood and tried to work out why he knew that name, Beldam House, had he tried to find it? He had, hadn't he? For a moment, he could only think of Gothic towers and giant plants, and for some reason parrots, and then he shook himself. A bad dream, probably. He had enough of them in the last night of short hours of sleep that he'd snatched. "Come on, Josh," called a voice from ahead, and he looked up to see the woman in dungarees. The woman who had either broken into his house and assaulted him, or else was his girlfriend, who he had been happily boinking all night, standing in the lee of the low wall, beckoning to him. Beside her stood a rusted cauldron. "I'm going to need you to trust me," she said. Essie thought that her heart had been broken before, and maybe it had, all those years ago when Sean leapt out of bed screaming when he realized what she'd done for one, and when she'd seen Bradley snogging someone else at the summer fete for another, when her mother used to leave for weeks, sometimes months at a time, and Essie sat outside the door wondering when she'd come back. Yeah, but none of them, absolutely none of them, hurt nearly as much as the way that Josh looked at her when she asked him to trust her. Rain dripped off his face and he said, "I don't even know who you are." The pain in her chest was almost physical. "But my sister trusts you, and what's more, she trusts you with her sons, so..." He glanced at Sienna. "I guess I'm gonna have to trust you too." Relief left Essie in one hard breath. "Well, thank you, I guess," she said. "Oh, thank you, Josh. You have no idea." Lilith glared at her, tapping her wrist. She didn't wear a watch, but Essie did, and she saw it was just 10:30. Not that she needed a watch to tell her that every nerve in her body was screaming. The quarter cross, exactly at the halfway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, the sunset of the year when the light tipped toward darkness, was in about 2 minutes. Right, thank you. Do you have my phone? Thanks, Sienna. Can I get you to? "Es a bet," said her mother. "We do not have time." Essie glanced down at her phone frantically. She had to get Josh to read what was on that ancient parchment so that he could break the perception spell. That could take less than 2 minutes. She'd also need him to seal with blood, and persuading him to do that when he couldn't even come closer than 10 feet was going to take significantly longer. "All right," she said, tucking the phone into her pocket. She would do that after the ritual, unless the ritual failed, and then there would be no point, because they would probably all be dead. I don't want to die with Josh hating me, she thought, but she didn't have much choice in the matter right now. She nodded to Lilith and lit the fire under the cauldron, and for a moment she was worried that the wood had gotten too wet, but she concentrated hard and flames whooshed up from it. The cauldron contained a potion that Avery had cooked up for them overnight, in between tending various broths that they were making for Maud. Neither Avery nor Blessing wanted to leave the older witch, and Essie couldn't entirely blame them. Besides, she knew that this was something that she had to do herself with Lilith. This whole thing had begun between the Winterscales and the Hopkins, and it had to end that way too. "In fire it began," she said. "In fire it must end." "Fire?" Josh said nervously. "You'll be fine. I won't do anything to hurt any of you. I promise, I promise, I promise." He didn't look much relieved, and neither did she. Essie might not hurt them, but she couldn't speak for Hopkins and what he would do. The contents of the cauldron began to bubble. It was a prop, just like everything was a prop. But into it, Avery had added clippings of all their hair, plus some stray ones collected from Josh and Sienna's pillows. Essie couldn't be entirely certain there weren't some cat and dog hairs mixed in there too, but she figured they were all part of the family, so that counted. Besides, it was the intention that counted. Essie had asked Avery to make something that strengthened her will and her power, and Avery had smiled and said, "Just think about who you're doing this for when I make it." And Essie thought of the other witches, of the village of Goodwinter, of all the witches who had come before her and would come after her. And then she thought about Sienna and the baby, and then she mostly thought about Josh. "And we have power," Avery had murmured as the potion changed from a murky brown to the green of Josh's shirt that he'd been wearing on their last day together. She dipped in a cup and took a sip. It tasted of cold, crisp snow and smoky autumn mornings. It tasted like spring blossoms and warm summer grass. Fire and ice, she told herself. What was one without the absence of the other? What was one but the absence of the other? "Matthew Hopkins," she shouted, "I summon thee." She grabbed her broom and walked in a rough circle around the cauldron, sweeping. My Matthew?" murmured Sienna, cuddling the baby protectively. Essie saw Lilith shake her head. "Matthew Hopkins, son of James Hopkins, father of John Hopkins," clarified Essie. "I summon thee to this time and place." She made the circle wide and made sure that Sienna and Josh were inside it. Her mother, she didn't worry about. Lilith knew what was expected of her. The baby has decided to join us for book club this morning for the first time. She usually sleeps through book club, but today she's decided it's time to kick mommy in the guts very hard. I hear you, honey. It's okay. "Matthew Hopkins, murderer of witches, I summon you to this place and time." She closed the circle and banged her broom on the ground. For a moment, a terrible moment, nothing happened. And not for the first time, Essie reflected on being a witch and thinking it would be a lot damn easier if spells were things that you learned and memorized instead of having to make them up every time. She might be worried about baby Matthews. She might also just hate witch hunters. She's descended from a long line of witches, of course. Said Josh, and then suddenly the fire roared and the earth trembled. "Are you sure this is safe?" said Sienna. She had both arms wrapped around the baby in its sling. "We will not harm you," said Lilith, and there was something very definite about that last syllable. Yeah, she might have really liked the muffin. From the sodden earth, something like ashes rose up, forming as they did the monstrous, I hear you, honey, you can calm down, monstrous shape of a man. It wasn't the well-dressed, handsome young man that they met in the 17th century, but more like what would have happened if his corpse was preserved in ice for hundreds of years. Aunt Becca says hi. Maybe that will calm you down. twisted and emaciated, the sunken face of a gargoyle. It lifted its head and roared, an ash fountained from its gaping mouth. Where the rain hit its blackened skin, it sizzled. Rage poured off of it like dry ice. Matthew Hopkins, son of James Hopkins, I bind thee to my will. I bind thee to my will. I bind thee to my will. The monster paused and turned its hideous face towards Lilith, because it was Lilith who had shouted those words. Your will, hag? Its voice whined like a cold wind under an ill-fitting door. I will thank you not to insult me, said Lilith sharply. The monster that had been Hopkins laughed a nasty, grating chuckle. I know you, it said. Essie began to move closer to Sienna while its attention was diverted. I know you of old, Lilith Winterscale. Lilith's chin came up. What of it? Even thy name speaks congress with the devil, spat Hopkins. His voice boiled with hatred now. Bind it to your will, Essie murmured to Sienna. What? Sienna looked terrified, as well she might. Repeat the words that my mother said. Say it 3 times. But my son is called Matthew. Yes, and thank you for that. Was his father called James? I don't actually know. Cosmic, muttered Essie. In front of her, Hopkins traded insults with Lilith, the shade of its body hissing and spitting in the rain. Call him the Witchfinder General. Do it now, please, quietly. Sienna looked like she would rather be anywhere but here, but she repeated the words that Essie had told her, and Essie nodded and crept closer to Josh. I need you to bind him, she whispered as loudly as she dared. Josh might just be in Hopkins' eye line. What? Josh looked stunned and terrified, which was fair enough. This was sort of an ice mummy ghost thing shouting insults right in front of him. Strumpet, shouted the monster that had been Hopkins. Putrid whore. Hey, Rosie. Hey, can you do some less of those insults there, buddy? Said Josh just as Essie reached him, and she could have shouted at him. Fantastic timing to draw his attention. Hopkins swung around, his desiccated face a few feet from Josh. What did you say? He grated. Josh swallowed and leaned back and stood his ground. A little bit less with the W talk, you know what I mean? She is a lady after all. I thank you for that, said Essie. But Hopkins made a sound like a snort. She is with the devil, he said. I have seen her pulling brat, and yet she'd be unwed. Pulling brat? Said Essie. Did her mother have another child 400 years ago? This is not the time or the place, said Lilith quickly. Essie figured time and place were rather mutable things for her mother, but she agreed that right now they did have more important things to do. Hopkins was leaning closer to Josh and inhaling, and she saw the look of recognition come over his face. Well, a whore I may be, but I am no blasphemer, said Lilith loudly, and Hopkins swung back to her. Blasphemer, he roared. Not just a whore, but a lying one, too. You take the words of Scripture and twist them to your own ends, shouted Lilith. For profit! You sell your soul for silver. Essie darted to Josh and whispered urgently, Say, Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder, I bind thee to my will. Say it 3 times. He looked at her like she was mad. Lady, I don't know what it is you think you're doing here, but I am trying to save the world and I need your help. Essie hissed. Just do it, Josh, please. She felt tears burning in her eyes. I know you can't remember me, but do it for Sienna. Do it for the baby, please, for all the people that you love. He glanced over at his sister, who was huddled against the ruined wall of the old manor house, cuddling the baby close. He looked back at Essie. His brown eyes were narrowed against the rain, but also against her, too. He glanced at the little monster, who was screaming Bible verses at Lilith, as if they were arrows or bullets. Yeah, maybe, Jen. The mechanic got to hear that since he started... Oops, sorry, dude. That's funny, Becca. Yeah, the second book could be about her sibling. Oh, F it, he muttered, and then slightly louder, Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder General, I bind thee to my will. Thank you, whispered Essie as he repeated it. Thank you, Josh. He gave her a wary nod, but kept his eyes on the monster. She waited until the last of Josh's repetitions had faded into silence, and then murmured her own. She felt it take hold, and the link between her and Hopkins and his filthy, rotten soul was being bound to her. She took in a deep breath and reminded herself of the smell of winter and summer, and then she raised her voice and shouted, Matthew Hopkins, who calls himself the Witchfinder General, I bind and abjure thee. His face whipped around and his horrible dried up eyes swiveled in her direction. The force of his malevolence was horrifying. He peered at her and then laughed and then mercilessly said, "It is pulling, babe," he said. As he began to put off her stride. What did he mean by that? Had he met her when she was a baby? "The whore's whelp," sneered the specter. "Fornicator." "Concentrate, Essie. We bind and abjure thee," she repeated, but Hopkins swooped in closer and breathed ash all over her. "Foul hag, born of hag," he said. "I remember thee, froze thy mother's tit as mere suckling babe, like Midas," he jeered, "but a weak and artless woman." I froze her? Essie's gaze darted to her mother, who avoided her gaze. I hurt her, she thought, just like I hurt Sean, just like I'd hurt Josh if he could ever remember me. "Hey," a hand touched hers, a warm human hand. She looked up, astonished to find Josh beside her. "He's just trying to distract you. Concentrate." "Useless hag who freezes all around her." "Let's go," begged Essie, tugging her hand away. "I don't want to hurt you." Oh, sorry, let go, not let's go. The corner of his mouth quirked. "You promised not to." From the other side of her, Sienna said, "You said it 3 times. That has to mean something, right?" Essie looked from one side of them to the other. "It means that the oath can't be broken." "Well then," said Josh, and he took his hand in hers firmly. "That means that you can't let go." Sienna took her other hand, and Josh said, "What did you come here to do?" Essie's fingers tightened around Josh's. He couldn't remember her, but he did trust her. He was still her Josh, the one that she'd fallen in love with, and that was more powerful than any magic. Essie looked at the monster taunting her and lifted her chin. I came to burn you," she said. Hopkins cackled. "Burn me? With that pathetic fire, thou hast the warmth of thy mother." Lilith came to stand on Sienna's other side and took her hand. "And what would you know about the warmth of a woman, Hopkins?" she said. "Yeah, no one's ever let you touch one," as he said. "Lies," hissed Hopkins. "I fathered a child." "Within wedlock," said Essie. "Even on a woman who gave you her consent," said Lilith. "What woman would give you consent?" said Sienna with the full force of withering scorn only a girl from Beverly Hills could even summon. "Are you sure you're not just angry at the world because a nice girl said no to you?" said Josh. Hopkins screamed and flew at them. He was insubstantial, no more than a sinking shadow. "How did you even know a nice girl said no to him?" Essie muttered. "Look at him," said Josh. "He's every angry guy watching corn in his mother's basement." "You want a nice girl, you gotta be a nice guy," agreed Sienna. "Nice girls owe you nothing," said Josh to the raging specter, and Essie felt a glow of pride. "Hag-ridden whore, son," roared Hopkins, surging forward. "Fire is the opposite of ice," Essie said to the other. "When I say so, everybody concentrate as hard as you can against burning him." But Sienna wasn't listening. "You stay the hell away from my baby," she snapped, recoiling. Essie and Lilith held her firm. Hopkins inched closer, and his hideous face was sniffing like a rabid dog. "Oh, another Hopkins whelp," he rasped. "That's Matthew. Sienna began, and Lilith's free hand slammed down over her mouth. "Don't give him the name," she snapped. No, never give him the name," Essie cried. Sienna's hand trembled in Essie's, but she railed. "You're not fit to speak it," she spat. "Good girl," Josh murmured. "Blood of my blood," crooned Hopkins thoughtfully. "You keep your filthy hands off my baby," Sienna said. "Off him?" Hopkins was nearly purring now. "How about in him?" "Now!" yelled Essie, and as Hopkins oozed closer to the baby in its sling, she said, "We burn thee with fire, we send thee to hell." "We burn thee for all eternity," shouted Lilith as the raindrops hitting Hopkins began to steam. "You will never rise again," roared Essie with all the force she could. "And you'll never hurt anyone either," Josh yelled. "You'll never work in this town again," screamed Sienna despite herself, and Essie nearly laughed. The thing that had been Hopkins began to wail. "With fire we burn you, we condemn you, we destroy you," shouted Essie. The rain came harder and harder, and it was a hot rain. Where it hit the monster, it burned like oil. "We cleanse you from this earth forever, and so it will be. So it will be." The words were a vehicle for her intent, and Essie concentrated with everything that she had, beaming out her will as hard as she could, to take away the ice that bound him, preserved him. All these years removed from the atom of the cold could be just burning him into ash and a fine powder. And as the screams of the others joined the scream of the storm, they turned the monster that had once been a man into flames and watched the ashes turn to mud. Ice merely held things in place. It was fire you needed to kill it for good. And in the end, Hopkins was just like a bacteria. Essie let go of Josh's hand, which she hadn't realized she'd been gripping quite so hard, and Sienna's, and then she marched over to the cauldron. Her head felt light. Her vision was blurred, but that might have been the rain on her glasses. Sorry, guys. She grasped the cauldron in both hands. The heat of it didn't burn her, and then she poured its contents all over the ground where the monster's ashes had fallen. Hopkins had thrived on hatred, and Essie knew perfectly well what the opposite of that was. You, she said to the steaming ground as the rain ceased and the wind dropped, can just... There is a child present, her mother warned. Well, you can love yourself, Essie finished, and the ground tilted a little beneath her feet. Hey, is the baby okay? Said Josh, and Sienna bit her lip. She looked a bit guilty. I hope so, she said, and she glanced back at the house. I left him in his crib. Josh sort of stared dumbly. Essie started to laugh, and she wasn't really sure if she could stop laughing. Then who? Josh was indicating the kangaroo pouch zipped into Sienna's jacket. Sienna pulled back the hood and showed him a doll that she'd shown Essie earlier. I wasn't going to bring him out here knowing that there was a monster here. Josh looked utterly bewildered. But how did you know that there was a monster? How did you know any of this? Did you read the parchment? Said Lilith, a weak sun beginning to shine. What parchment? It's on my phone, murmured Essie, who could really use a nice sit-down right around now. Sienna shrugged. I don't know, Essie said it would be okay, and I trust her. Essie smiled at Sienna, who was going in and out of focus. Hey, whoa, look, are you okay? Said Josh, rushing to catch her as the walls and the trees swung around in the wrong direction. Essie blinked up at him, not sure how she had come to lying in the mud with Josh's arms around her. She's exhausted, said Lilith briskly. I dare say we could all do with a nice cup of tea. Tea? Said Josh incredulously. Tenderly, he brushed Essie's sodden hair away from her face. Sometimes the British are just so British, agreed Sienna. Essie tried to focus on Josh's beloved face. He was so handsome. His eyes were so kind. You were brilliant, she told him, and she felt about 400 years old. Maybe she was 400 years old. He smiled. Hey, look, I was just following your lead, right? You don't even know me, she murmured. Well, no, said Josh, but I figured I might like to. Essie smiled and closed her eyes for just a moment. Dang. So we have 2 chapters to get through tomorrow, apparently. Dang, dang, diggity dang. That would have been funny, Becca. So that's exciting. I was hoping his memory was going to come back to me. I know, Sophie. I think he needs to read the parchment first, though, right? I don't know. We'll see. It is so good. We have 2 more chapters in this book. Then we'll read the other ones. I don't know. It's very sweet. Don't forget, we do have Roll for Slime tonight. If you are on a group level for Roll for Slime, please sign up for tonight. If you're not at a group level, there are spots on group levels. Like, you don't have to just get it separately. There are group spots available to be in a group Roll for Slime permanently, because I know a lot of people sign up every week anyway. So rather than signing up every week, it's cheaper if you just get on the tier. What else? I think that's the whole kit and caboodle. Mailing more orders today, of course. I might... No. All right. Anyway. I'll see you all later, 4:30, right here in this space for Roll for Slime time. Yes, pokes the baby. Bye, guys.